So, Deborah, I have a question for you that we get frequently here at Loveology. It has to do with anxiety. And of course, anxiety is an individual experience, but it can't help but to impact a relationship.
Yeah. Les, I think that's more people than we want to acknowledge. I think that's more of us than sometimes we even want to say. Because anxiety is one of those things that I think has a little bit of a stigma. People are afraid to share what they're going through until they really hit a wall. And that's kind of what I see in my practice as a licensed counselor. So one way I like to talk about emotional pressure and anxiety, I like to use the analogy of a volcano. What happens is human beings are kind of like a volcano, and we've got all of this underlying pressure happening underneath the surface, and if we don't deal with that pressure is emotions that we haven't dealt with, anxiety, stress. If we don't deal with it, what happens is it finds the point of least resistance. And just like a volcano, it explodes. And usually it's in the form of an emotional explosion like a panic attack or relationship problems or addictions or anger and rage. And so this individual pressure, when we don't deal with it in a healthy way, ends up coming up to the surface and really impacting our relationships. And anxiety is just one of those pieces hovering underneath the surface, building that pressure.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I think all of us can identify with that metaphor of the volcano. So, what do we do in practical terms if we're suffering from anxiety? And I know there's a scale of anxiety, but what do we do? What
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I think we need to acknowledge it. Put to words what's happening. When we acknowledge our emotions, it really begins to alleviate some of that pressure. We have to start by naming what's going on and putting words to it. Here are the things that are stressing me out. Here's what I'm actually feeling. I'm insecure. I'm overwhelmed. I'm anxious. I'm struggling. I mean, we hardly use those words when it comes to naming our emotions. There's probably over 500 emotions that you could use if you just Google a list of emotions, but a lot of times we're not even aware of what's happening. So number one is you acknowledge your emotions.
and when you say acknowledge that, do you acknowledge that to your spouse? Do you just do that in a journal? What are you suggesting?
Well, I think the first place is to acknowledge it to yourself and to God, because you've got to do the work here before you can do the work relationally. So that's the first step, is to kind of be able to put it into words yourself, to process. I think journaling is a great exercise, which kind of leads us to our next point. After you acknowledge your emotions, you've got to express them in a healthy way. And for most people who are married, that's going to be their spouse. Learning how to communicate to their spouse what they're feeling, to actually put it into words rather than let it come out through your emotions when you're upset or in a conflict or, in an argument, but to actually sit them down and say, hey, listen, here's some things that are building up pressure for me underneath the surface. Here are some things I'm struggling with, and begin to process with them. If you don't feel like you have a safe spouse to be able to process with, I think journaling is a great alternative. Research has shown that just by journaling, you can alleviate some emotional distress. So begin to journal, put those things into words until you find a safe person to be able to express those emotions to. So those are the first two things. And then the third thing is to alleviate those emotions. When we talk about anxiety, it is not a permanent place in life. It is a season, and it is a signal to our body that something needs to change. And so we've got to see anxiety as a signal. And maybe that means we need to set boundaries in our life, or maybe it means we need to eliminate some things from our schedule so we're not feeling overwhelmed. For most people, that means there's got to be a place for therapy and even medication for some people to begin alleviating some of those struggles of anxiety. And so it's important to understand that we can't control everything with anxiety, but there are certainly things that we can alleviate. And when we begin to get healthy standing alone, it begins to impact the health of our relationships as well.
Absolutely. Your relationships can only be as healthy as you are. And so it's so critical. Deborah, thanks, as always, for your wisdom here at Loveology.
Hey friends, we really hope you're enjoying the marriage conversations here on our A Better Us YouTube channel.
We have hundreds of more helpful marriage videos designed to give you hope and tools to make your marriage even better.
Right. And you can see just a few options we think you might like here and here. So keep exploring.
Oh, and make sure you subscribe by clicking here so you don't miss out on all the great marriage help we have coming your way all the time.